People are drinking and eating for now. Thank you. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you all for coming and listening to me. So today I'm going to be talking about some lessons learned. When we were migrating to React, one application that we're developing here called TweetDeck. So again, before that, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Leonardo, but everyone calls me Lenny. So that's my Twitter handle. So right now I'm working at the at the Twitter web team. So building the Twitter.com application. By the way, we are hiring for my team. So if you're interested, just reach me out after the talk. I previously I joined Twitter to join the TweetDeck team, which is based here in London. So this talk is mainly about my experience during that time. So for you that may not know what TweetDeck is, whoops, there we go. It looks like this. So it's basically, I mean, you can think of it as a Twitter.com, but with multiple timelines, where each timeline kind of updates in real time. If you go to tweetdeck.twitter.com, you will see that tweets start appearing like in real time without you doing anything as they come up. It also has some other advanced features such as like scheduling tweets, more like advanced filtering. So it's basically a client aimed for power users such as journalists or PR people or people working on trying to see what the community is talking about a particular topic. And this is also TweetDeck. Well, I mean, this is what it used to be a long time ago. So TweetDeck's been here for like a long time. It was actually a company that was acquired by Twitter, like a couple of years ago. And it wasn't even a web app in the beginning. So this is actually an Adobe Air application. So this wasn't even using any like JavaScript, HTML, or CSS. So as you can imagine, like over time, this application went through like a lot of refactors, migrations, and features, bugs, tech stacks, and most importantly, it accumulated like a lot of tech debt over those years. So today I want to talk about how we migrated to React. So you can think of it, we added like another tech choice into the stack, but we did it so that we can tackle some of that tech debt that we were accumulating. So a quick show of hands, how many of you are like going through some migration or transition to adopt React? Or okay, cool, quite a few. So maybe you will find some of these lessons useful, hopefully. So the reason why we decided to use React was that we wanted to have explicit dependencies and relationships between components. So, I mean, probably like you all are familiar with what React brings to the game, but it's easy sometimes to forget what it was used to before using React. So the fact that we can have explicit dependencies and relationships like in the code directly was something that was very appealing to us. And we were having a lot of bugs around that. So things that we were like modifying in one part of the app were like breaking some other unrelated part. It was really slowing us down. And also the rest of the company, like the other applications and teams at Twitter, were already using React. So we wanted to like go and like, get into their same stack so we can reuse some of the functionality that they already built. Some components, like we have a couple of component libraries internally. So yeah, we wanted to like also avoid doing all the work twice. So again, I want to share like some of the lessons during this transition that worked for us. We're still like, I mean, at the time when I was at the team, we're still like a long way to go before having like a fully React application. But we built like quite a few significant features with it. So these are the 4 things that I want to share today. So let's go through each of them. So the first one is like to adapt your code base. So at TweetDeck, we mainly use, or we used to use like one library to render UI. It was called Flight.js. It was like a very lightweight abstraction on top of jQuery. Yes, jQuery. And it was like very, very limited. The only way that it allowed components to communicate with each other was with events. And it didn't even prescribe like a way to render things. If someone is familiar with what Backbone used to be, like with what Backbone was, it's pretty similar to that, even more lightweight. And as such, the kind of the interface between components wasn't very clear. It was like up to you to build a pattern. And if you don't have one pattern or one structure, every developer will come up with their own. So it was very hard to see like at the glance what a component was doing with some other components in their surroundings. But obviously over time we started using it even more and more, and we were like, obviously some patterns started to prove more useful than others, so those became like the way to build components. So we made this kind of library on top of Flight a bit more opinionated. And also at some point React came out. We thought it was like a really cool thing, or like it was worth looking into it. So we started like adopting some patterns and practices from React as well. Things such as, so yeah, like basically we kind of shaped our components in a way that looked very similar to what React does. So things like props and state. So we brought those concepts into our components. The concept of mounting a component and tearing it down, and some of the lifecycle methods, like whenever you are going to be receiving new props, or whenever you're going to be receiving a new state, when you're about to update, or when you just updated and stuff like that. So basically, we were closing that gap between Flight.js and React. Like this was even before knowing that we were going to be migrating to React. And this turned out to be very useful for that decision, actually, because since we had that, it was very easy for us to create two small, and really like they were like small, just less than 50 lines of code each, to port from one component library, from one library to the other, like going from taking a Flight component and converting it into a React component, or taking a React component and converting it to a Flight component, which allowed us to mix and match our component tree as we needed. So this allowed us to have the freedom to migrate each component in any place of the code that we wanted. And they would be working seamlessly. So this was like a key thing that we didn't do, planning that we were eventually going to be migrating to React, but turned out being very useful. The second one, should we be migrating top-down or bottom-up? And the truth is that, yeah, both are really useful. So in most cases, when we have like an application built of several components, we end up picking the leaf components, the one that don't have any dependencies, and we start migrating those to try out React, or to begin any kind of migration at the component level. So we start with the first one, we migrate it, we start the second one, and once like all the subcomponents for a given component are already migrated, we are allowed to go one level up and migrate the second one, like the parent one. So this works. That's an approach that really works well. But we can also go the other way around. Given that we have this kind of abstraction that allows us to mix and match between one component library to another, we can actually start from anywhere in the tree. So we could start with, for example, that component that still has a couple of children that are not yet migrated. We can wrap them with this library, with this function that abstracts which library we're using, and then we can keep doing that with the other components. And we keep going up, and when we have like an application shell of like the main components, or like a submodule with the main components migrated but not the leaf ones, we don't really care too much about the leaf ones at this point. We can start doing things such as like adding, like using the React features such as code splitting, or like any other thing that we want. Like we can treat that component as an actual React component. So this was also really useful to like kind of structure a sub part of the application faster than going from bottom to top. The third one, which was a bit specific for like our reason to migrate to React, is to aim for explicitness, because we had a lot of implicitness in our app. And as you may all know, like the way to do that with React is to pass props down and make events go up by a callback props. So in our case, this is like an example, a simplified example of what we used to have with Flight. You can see like the similarities with the lifecycle hooks, but you can see that we are so we're communicating between the two components using events. So you can see at some point that we are doing like on something, then attaching some children. That's the way to kind of have children components, and then we at some point trigger some stuff. Using events is nice because it allows you to decouple one component from another, but if those two components are actually coupled, it becomes a problem, because the fact that you cannot see the connection in the code, and also like even worse, like the behavior of like the events that bubble up can like make the coupling super implicit, or like you can be using something from like one of the bottommost components in the tree used by one of the topmost components, and it's very hard to track that. So that's where the bugs come. And that's even worse when like components at the bottom start out also listening for events that are at the top level. So yeah, you can see here explicitly that we are listening to that event that is being triggered, but if we only look at the top component, there's really no way to see where that event is coming from. We need to go and look at all the files that actually trigger that event and see how it is connected to the component that is listening to it. So yeah, and also like again, we may be listening to like a similar event, maybe like an event that just has a one letter difference, and we maybe not be able to, like, if we don't just explicitly like search and replace for that exact text, we won't be like, we may not notice that we're not actually listening for that event, but we're listening for another. So with our if we decided to migrate the filters component to React, and we were able to wrap that the child component to this function that automatically converts that to a React component, we are able to track that relationship very explicitly with a callback prop. So now we can see exactly where, what are we using from this child component, and we're resolving the implicitness. We're making like the event relationship explicit. So whenever we have a bug or something related to that, we can track that in the code very easily by looking at the event, going up or down, trying to find the place where the bug actually is, before we had to look at the entire code base. So the idea with this approach is to, as we were migrating to React, to try to push the implicitness to the edges and make the relationship between like the React boundaries as explicit as possible. So that whenever we're like, when we migrate the entire code base, we will be like solving completely the implicitness. The last one is, I mean, it's probably general for like any kind of refactor, but this one ended up being very useful for our migration to React specifically. So I think it's very useful to point it out as well. So the idea to test your components or anything in general as a black box, the idea is basically just rendering that component into a DOM. If you're doing like unit tests with Jest, for example, you have the JS DOM, which is faster than testing that in the browser. But the idea is to render that component into a DOM and then just use the DOM directly as you would be using it directly in the browser, like clicking in the browser interactively. That allows you to like decouple yourself from the implementation of that component And in most cases, you don't even need to change the implementation of your test when you're trying to test between two different frameworks. Or like, for example, if we migrated this component from Flight to React, and we had a test like this, the only thing that would be needed to change is that render method. Because the behavior, if we did things right, shouldn't have changed, because by definition, a refactor is just changing the implementation without changing the behavior. So that allows us to move fast by just like making sure that things are right as they were before. And we can even, while we're doing the migration, we can run this test twice, one with the old component and one with the new component, and make sure that the behavior is the same. So yeah, actually, there's a lot to talk about these types of tests. I'm a big fan of this. If you don't know about them, I suggest you take a look at the React testing library from Ken Dotz, or any talk from Ken Dotz that talks about this particular topic. So yeah, I think that's a really good way to learn more about the benefits of this type of testing. And also, I'm happy to talk about that during the break. Last thing that I wanted to share, like a couple of general lessons learned, like not just for like migrating technically, is like things I learned from this migration in particular, and from other types of migrations or tech tackling that I did here at Twitter so far. So the first one is to try to do it in incremental steps. So the worst thing that you can do, in my opinion, for a big like application migration is to do it in one go. Sometimes you see like on Twitter, like, hey, I removed 2,000 or 7,000 lines of code with this migration. And I don't know, to me, that's very scary, because I would say that it's likely, like, not even likely, I think it's certain that you will at least have one bug in that migration. And you either revert it, fix it, and try again, or if it's too late to revert by now, then you like are like stressing out, working weekends, trying to fix the things that you are trying that you found while people are complaining in production. And also, I don't think it works very well at the team level, because if you change, like imagine if you were like the person that is now pulling from master with everything changed. I imagine that, and you were in the middle of a branch, like doing some work, and you need to rebase and merge the conflicts. Like I fix the conflicts. I think at some point you will be like a bit pissed off, and you would say like, what is the reason of this change? Like you will become like less on board with that change than if you were like taking as part of that process and doing that in an incremental step. So I think, again, like this is like the thing to try to do at least. Sometimes it's not possible. There may be some cases where it's not possible. But whenever possible, try to do it in incremental steps that like should be small steps whenever possible, such that the application is always working in every step. And yeah, it's not like it's easy enough to review at each step by different people. And so, and I also think that with React, this is actually easier, because like in UI, like with components, that by nature is like the separation, like that is the step. Like each component at least can be a step. So we can try to find like the related components and migrate each one as a separate step, but then like trying to move to the surrounding ones, like migrating the different submodules until you are done with one submodule, and then keep going with the other ones until you are done with the rest of the app. So for React, for migrating a UI to React, I think this is the key and probably the biggest selling point of like React adoption. The second one is like to measure, like, and this goes in hand with like doing incremental steps. Like you need to be able to measure the benefits of your migration. Otherwise, there's no reason in doing it. And also, like the reason can be very well be for developer experience reasons, but they need to be measured in some way. And also you need to measure things that you weren't expecting to change. So if the migration aims to increase performance over time, then you need to measure that you're actually increasing migration, improving migration. Improving performance. If the performance is going to be like better at the end of the migration, you should at least check that the performance is not getting worse in each intermediate step. Like the performance is still acceptable. And the same with any other type of metric. So I think it's the most important thing is also like, yeah, to know which metrics you are changing that you weren't expecting to, so that you can fix and like understand first, fix it, and then keep iterating on that step. And finally, following through. I think that's probably one of the, well, I mean, all three are important, but this one is key and is something that never, it's really hard to make it happen. How many times have you seen like, well, we've seen that on TweetDeck. We have a lot of different texts accumulated over time. Like a refactor starts, but it never finishes. So someone starts with the work, and then that never ends up happening for the entire code base. So we have one area of the app that was migrated to this component library or this technology in general. This other app that ends up being migrated to this other area. And the app is not uniform. So you have like 2 or 3 or more ways to do the same thing. And that's like the worst thing that you want for you and your team. So it's good to think of a roadmap, like knowing when, like how and when, roughly, like you're going to be migrating or you're going to be finishing. So in order to know that you have like a horizon that you want to follow. And I think it's natural that if you do it on your own, at some point you will lose interest and want to go and do something else unless the migration is small enough. So it's also important to not make this a job of a single person. Like try to get buy-in from more people in your team, start migrating with more than one people, and ideally it should be like a whole team effort. So you should work a lot of like on documentation, on like having hours where you allocate yourself for help and support for other people trying to do migrations, and making other people become the owners also of that migration. In that way, you will be able to achieve any migration a lot faster, and everyone will be on board and we will want to get to the end of the line the same as you before you lose the motivation. So, yeah, that's pretty much all that I wanted to share. So thank you very much.